Hi everyone, welcome to the Car Chat podcast. I'm Sam Moores, and with me today we have Peter Greaves, or Petrol Ped. Some of you may know him. Hi.
Hello, mate. How are you?
Very good, very good. For those that sort of haven't come across you before, can you give me like a 1-2 lines? Who are you and what do you do?
I am a car YouTuber. I never really know now. Well, the really weird thing now is because I'm full time. Is when someone says, "What do you do?" I'm still struggling to explain what I do. So I'm a car YouTuber. I refrain from using the word influencer, even though that's actually we kind of do that quite a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I basically make videos about cars and put them on YouTube. And it was a hobby turned job. And yeah, I'm very lucky, and I get to every day I wake up and think, what am I going to film today? And I think, how lucky are you to do that?
That's cool. That's a good place to be in. When you, for those that, if you've not come across Peter or Ped or Petrol Ped or however you want to refer to
However,
we did a podcast a while ago. I'm going to guess 2 years ago, maybe the first one.
it was pre-lockdown, so it would have been 2.5 years ago, probably.
About your journey and how you got into all of this stuff. And then we did another one it was about a year ago with what you've done up to this, sort of that point. But I think at that point in time, you weren't full time.
No.
So you've made the big switch.
Yeah, it kind of, it sneaks up on you, I think. I think when you first start, I mean, any aspiring YouTuber out there will probably do what me and you and all of our kind of YouTube mates did and watch other channels and think, oh, I'd love to do that. And you just start making some videos and normally really bad ones and dream one day you might be that person on a launch or driving a supercar or doing whatever cool thing that your YouTube channels that you watch do. And you start doing that, and then over time, your channel grows and your following grows and your reach grows. So you start working with if you're a car YouTuber, with car brands and things. And then financially, you start to earn a bit of ad revenue. Although I wouldn't start a YouTube channel today, I don't think, because the rules are quite different now to when I started anyway. But you start earning a little bit of revenue. And I know to start with, I thought if I could earn enough money to pay for the monthlies on my car finance, that would be all I wanted to do. Yeah. And then you hit that mark and then you think, well, hold on a minute, maybe there's an opportunity to do a bit more, and over time eventually you get there. But even when you're there, it's still it's not I often describe it to people, my job relies on me earning money based on an algorithm that I don't understand and I don't really know how to make it perform, and that's not a good place to be.
That is, yes, that is a tricky master, I would say. And your point about trying to earn enough ad revenue to cover the car payment, a lot of YouTubers, they just, when they earn more ad revenue, they just increase the car payments, which actually is a quirk of the automotive YouTube space. I think when you look at some YouTubers, and they just are getting more and more and more cars over time. And they go, this doesn't really make sense. Why are they doing that? There is all of the obvious reasons, like your audience, views, if that's part of your channel. But then as a business, because your business is based around creating content and owning cars and stuff, your car payments are a cost of your business. So over time, you can pay off cars as part of your business costs and build up an asset base that at some point in time, when you decide to quit the whole thing, you could sell off.
Yeah, it's funny actually, because I'm maybe it's because I'm thinking, right, I need to buy a really cool car now, because I've 6 years as a YouTuber and I've had a couple of minis which have been brilliant for the channel, but I'd like to buy something nice. And I have talked to my accountant and stuff, and there are things you can do and things you can't do, and I think it depends on who you ask. But for sure, if you're making content around your car, or for me, I do a lot of bike stuff as well, push bike stuff. Then there are costs that you can put through your business because they're legitimate costs of making that video, and that means, you know, especially around things like modifying cars or adding to them in some way, then that's definitely the case. But I think what a lot of people don't realize, and I'm by no means in this league at all, but if you look at some of the really big channels like Tim and so on, that Shmi is a car for him or for a bigger channel is a content journey. Yeah. And they have their lifespan. So, you know, in the old days, it was I buy my car, I'd do 10 things I hate, 10 things I love. I'd wrap it, I'd put a new exhaust on it, then I'd sell it. I know that's a bit cliche, but there's still a journey that each car can have. Yeah. And what's quite interesting, my 2 cars on my channel are both minis, and they're I've kind of done all I can do with those 2 cars now. And the difficult choice I'm facing now is, do I move one of them on and get something else? So yeah, it is a funny one, but the car finance thing, and it is funny how I know to start with, like, if I could earn maybe £200 or £300 a month, that would be great. And then suddenly it's, well, maybe £600 a month, and then your car aspirations start going up.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
it's an interesting one. Do you think, does that side of it, obviously, we're petrol heads, it's nice owning nicer stuff, but I would almost say, and all of these things mean different things for different people. So people buy cars for different reasons and whatnot. And I've been through probably an extreme version of the car buying sort of curve.
Really? And I had not noticed that.
Yeah, exactly. No, may not have noticed. And I think I'm heavily at the moment on the downside of having gone crazy, in inverted commas, ticked off a few like big, or one particular big car, you know, iconic, etc., owned it, and then gone, after, you know, I think I had that for 40 for 5 years, 6 years, maybe 5.5, something like that, and gone, okay, I've got a lot out of that, but like it's now I'm starting to see more negatives than positives, and then it comes into market timing, etc., etc. And I'm now very much in I want less things, just generally, because it's like less decisions. A huge one was, if you had the dream situation. I was chatting to some friends, and he was like, I think if you gave me unlimited money, I could do it in 40 cars. And he had his list of like 10 classics, 10 race cars, whatever, 5 dailies or something. And he was like 40. And and he was like, what about you? And I was like, genuinely, my honest answer to this right now is, if I could somehow do it, I would rather have one car. Yeah. It's never going to work because of usage and whatever and stuff like that. But I would love the one car, because then you don't only servicing one car, you grab the keys to that one car. You're never like, oh, but I could take that one, or I could take that one. You're never servicing stuff, like all of that. So I'm trying to sort of come back to a car to use.
I think it's a factor of growing older, right? But I think so. I'm a bit the same. I think much of the want is in the wanting, not the owning. So, you know, totally. one of the things that I have always thought, I'd love to have a supercar one day. And actually, one of the things that YouTube has taught me is I'm now in a position where I can get my hands on quite a lot of different types of cars through the brands that I work with. So, you know, if I did a video last week with Audi, and I really wanted a really good performance EV. I had a really good video idea, and I got my hands on an RS e-tron GT. And I had it for 4 or 5 days, did my film and experienced it, and it was amazing. But I gave it back, and then I can have something else. And I think actually the joy of doing YouTube is you get to experience lots and lots of different cars in lots of different price points, but you never have the pain of having to pay for them, the pain of the depreciation on them, and you just give them back and then have something else. And the more you do that, the less inclined you are to sink all your money in one car.
Yes.
So I kind of get it, and I think that especially the really high end stuff. My worry with the YouTube world is, and I think we as creators have a responsibility that I think some take seriously and deal with quite well, and others don't. Is there's a responsibility for me is if you go and buy a car, and it doesn't matter whether it's a supercar or whether it's a Ford Fiesta or something, is if you buy a car, especially if you buy a car new, there's a very good chance you're going to lose money on it. And in fact, actually 90% of car purchases you're going to lose money on it. And I think kids growing up watching YouTube could very mistakenly think that you can just keep buying and changing your cars all the time and it not have no financial repercussions at all. And that's just not the case.
Not at all.
And if you speak to any of us, we've all at some stage of badness been hit by depreciation, been hit by wanting to change or get out of a car and it costing you money. And I'm always terrified of that because it's happened to me a couple of times in the past. Not, I guess, for me at the time, it was big money. I remember
it's always big money.
We bought a BMW 325 convertible, beautiful car, absolutely beautiful car. And I remember the numbers. It was 30. This is dating it as well. It was £32,000. It was a 6-month-old ex-demonstrator. Beautiful car. And we owned it for about 9 months, 12 months. And then we realized that it wasn't the right car. And our journey profile had changed a bit. And we went to take it back to BMW and get it. And we got offered £21,000 for it.
Yeah.
And at the time, I just remember thinking, oh, my God, what have we done? But that's what happens, right? And that for me, that's why I've always had, if you like, normal cars. But I am going to break those rules soon and buy something really nice because I'm fed up with having normal cars.
Well, they're annoyingly, there is I don't know whether it's necessarily a price point, but there is a price element to it there's expensive normal cars in inverted commas. Like, let's just say high-end, let's say German saloons or whatever, all the sort of stuff that is fundamentally not limited in any way, shape or form, and it's not considered like, it's like a nice car. Mm-hmm. Those all absolutely just like shit value, just left, right and center. I've lost way more money on my daily, in inverted commas, which is like, has been, I had an RS3, I had an S3, I've had a lot of Audis, an S4, like a bunch of those cars. Every single one I bought reasonably new, or the RS3 was new, and I've lost like chunky amounts as a percentage on it. Whereas, let's say the car on one of the cars, actually, a few of the cars on the wall behind you, if you had bought a Caterham, they hold value.
Well, mate, so that car there, I bought that for £24,000. Interesting stuff. Yeah, I bought it with a friend. Our wives said that we could spend £4,000 each to buy a track car. So combine £4,000 to £8,000. So we looked at M3s and a few other things. And I said to my mate, Andrew, I said, look, I really want a Caterham. I've always wanted one since I was at college. But I haven't sat in one since the motor show in like 1990. So I don't know whether I fit. Let's go to Caterham and test drive one. And he'd never driven one. So anyway, we went to Caterham and bought a 24 grand Superlight on finance.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that car, that was £24,000, ran it for 2 years, sold it for £24,000.
Exactly. So that's a brilliant example of, you could spend an amount that, that's like a small hot hatch. In fact, you could even spend more on a small little hot hatch, and retains its value. Brilliant. There's certain cars. What else? Other cars. Lotuses, surprisingly, like retain value. I guess they don't sell that many. The GT4 behind you.
Okay, my GT4.
If you could get those new,
you can get one,
which you can now. I think you just put your name down and you wait, and eventually you'll get one.
I mean, I guess the other thing is the last 9 months, the whole used car market's kind of gone a bit topsy-turvy anyway, hasn't it, really? Some of the used car prices. And
that has spurred me to change cars a few times in the last things I wouldn't have done necessarily because of price changes. I've kind of gone for it because I've owned a car that's gone up, and then it was like, well, okay, brilliant. and then somehow managed to do a good deal and like wormed my way through. And I'll call
Are you
that,
the trade up guy? You
like,
are a trade up guy.
I like it like a trade sometimes, but 2021 was my like Ferrari year, the end of the Ferraris. I would call 2021 for me. Like owned F40, sold that 812, lucked out. It went up. So I didn't lose any money when I sold it, or it was like 500 quid or something, which I did, I think 4,000 miles. So I was kind of expecting.
That's a pretty cheap 3,000 or 4,000 miles in a Ferrari.
Exactly.
Right?
I thought that was going to be chunky. Then got into the Lisso, did 5,000 miles in that, and sold that for a profit. Small profit, but like a profit, which was like good. Great.
To a mutual friend.
Whose car you have driven.
I have.
What's his? Dino.
Yeah, 246
that?
Dino. Yeah.
I've not driven one.
Oh, mate. Oh, it was stunning. I mean, there are things that you don't get in a car like that, in terms of modern day performance and stuff. I mean, my Mini has, probably more horsepower than that. But the whole experience of driving a car like that was just mind blowing. It really was. And, the noise it made, because it's the V6, which obviously quite an unusual thing for a Ferrari, or the new one, the new, I need 246, 296 is V6. But yeah, it was a beautiful car, really beautiful. And it drove beautifully. I was quite surprised. I assumed that he was going to come out with me, but he said, no, off you go. I was like, really? It's like,
nice.
Yeah. I was like, okay. But yeah, it was good. It was a good day because I drove a back-to-back. I drove that and a 308 back-to-back. So that was a good day.
How did those two compare? Quite different. But yeah, so you drove a 308 GTS.
Yes. Yeah.
How was that?
Yeah. I mean, again, the replacement to the Dino. So a little bit more cramped inside. Bizarrely, I couldn't quite get my left leg in between the steering wheel and the gear lever. So it was kind of fourth was tricky. Fifth was okay. But yeah, beautiful car. Again, a mutual friend stroke contact of ours. It's his car and beautifully restored and, absolutely stunning thing. I should have really worn my Hawaiian shirt and got my tash growing a bit more to do the whole Magnum thing. But
yeah.
But that for me, those experiences, that's why I do YouTube, is the opportunity to drive cars that, I mean, for me, I think a 308 was probably the first. It was certainly the first Ferrari I ever really kind of understood what a Ferrari was, and the first supercar that I kind of lusted after. Shortly after that, then I guess Ferrari-wise, you had things like the white Testarossa in Miami Vice and those type of things. But for me, Magnum PI driving is Ferrari. That was the first time I ever thought. I mean, actually, for many years, that was a Ferrari. I didn't know they made other cars. Yeah. I just thought that's what a Ferrari was. So to drive one was very cool.
Yeah, it's cool. And I think getting to drive cars, like I'm very lucky to get to drive a lot of stuff, and you get to drive a lot of stuff. And I think that's part of the reason why now I'm like, owning cars is less important, because I kind of get to drive things. And so it's like, well, if I've got one thing that I drive a lot, that's slightly better for me. But with this whole going full-time YouTube, I felt this slightly ties in. This is a tenuous link, but we're going to get there.
Okay.
One of the things that I know for me with the podcast, has to make sense. Like it takes me a lot of time, and I love doing it, but sort of financially, it kind of has to make some sense at some point, or at least have a vision to make sense in the future. And one of the reasons that it now works is because of a company called The Market, who now you have a tie-in with. I sort of met them through a mutual person on the internet who now works for them, and I've since met most of them, and then now also Bonhams. But for me, it was just, I didn't know much about them when they came about, and then met the team who were just great. Like ignoring all of the business side of it, like I really get on with the people behind it, which I think has helped me and what we want to do. And I think they're very much, from my side, it's about, they said, Sam, like, what do you want to do this year?
Yeah.
Like that's how they approached it, rather than like, we want you to jump through these hoops. And they're like, we want to help you. And then we think that will probably help us. How did you come across them? And
mate, it's because of you, actually. so two couple of things. I mean, firstly, I mean, I'm so excited about my tie-up with those guys for just the access to cars and content that it will bring. But I'm sure we'll talk about that in a moment. But I was at a party with a friend, and we got talking about cars and the value of high value cars and so on. And I just made a throwaway comment about your F40 having been sold recently, and the fact that, you know, on your podcast you documented it well. You got to the point where you were worried about every mile you put on it, every scratch that it could get, and you decided to move it on. And at that party was the guy who started the market, and we got introduced, and you know, that was the conversation started, really. And the reason why I wanted to kind of, I thought it'd be a really great tie-in. You've mentioned about, you know, being full-time. So you'll be the same with your podcast. You're always trying to find what the next guest might be and what the next subject might be. And for us as car YouTubers, for me, I'm always trying to find what you know, great cars to share with my audience. I don't have a massive car collection of my own. I still do great content with my own cars, but it's all about new cars. And whilst I still want to cover new cars to market and press launches from all the big manufacturers that I work with, I really like individual novel cars that have got a story that there might not be. You know, if you go to a car launch, I love going to them, but if you go to a car launch, there'll be, I don't know, a dozen other journalists there, maybe half a dozen YouTubers, and within a day or two of the embargo lifting, you've probably got 10 videos on YouTube that are all very similar. It's very difficult to cut through, especially if you're up against the really big channels. And, you know, I love my reviews, but if I've got a choice, I'll go and watch Henry Catchpole because he's like the best, the best guy there is, you know? So if you can do a video of a car that no one's done a video of, then for me, my audience enjoys that. I think it's interesting, and that's what the market with their and Bonhams, their sale room, the cars that go through there. Some of those cars have just got incredible stories and are really special. And it might be something like your F40, which I'm still bummed I never got to drive, by the way. But you know, all the guys at the market love driving it. Or it might be cars from my early driving days. You know, a Renault 5 GT Turbo or a Lotus Carlton or a Renault. They just sold a Renault Clio Williams, absolutely beautiful thing. So it's not going to be always the ridiculously expensive high flying supercars, and that for me, I'm really, really excited. And the Dino and the 308 was the first two videos that I've done with them. I'm going to do a series called Hammer Time, which I thought was, I'm not going to wear big baggy shorts, but a play on the gavel going down, and it's really exciting. So yeah, the hope, you know, hopefully, because we could do some stuff together, which would be really good this year. I know the guys are very excited about some of the things you want to do, and likewise for me. So it's a really exciting development in the channel for sure.
Yeah, and it's finding, for me, I've realised I've had an opportunity. Well, with let's say podcast and a little bit YouTube, but I want to do YouTube only when I kind of want to YouTube if I can help it. Like I don't particularly want to do that much at the moment. But finding partners, for me at the moment, it's really important, and it's so valuable to find a partner like my partnership with the market and now Bonhams. Like it's long term, everyone's kind of in it. I feel like everyone's pushing the right direction, and it's going to be for a long time. So the stress effort side of it, you've got to deliver your side, and they help you and whatever, and they do their side. But working with a company for like 1 week or one video on a small one-off thing, I think a huge part of it, and this is part of the thing I talked to them about, was to be honest, just the authenticity side of it. Like I would rather, and I think anyone would, but like I'd rather find 3 brands that work together for different type, each of different thing, and work with 3 brands and help them, me, and just do that. And then be sorted and not be like, oh yeah, here's this random whatever electronic device that I'm going to tell you about for 1 week and you're never going to hear of again. Like,
yeah. And do you know, for me, I've done a couple of videos on my channel about it, and for those people listening, when someone says, "Oh, they're full-time YouTube or full-time podcaster," the undertaking that's actually to monetize your audience in a way that doesn't kind of switch your audience off is super difficult for me. I think, you probably have the same. I get approached probably by 3 or 4 different brands every day saying, will you advertise this brand on your channel? And that could be anything from an online game, a gambling app, a piece of technology, mostly not car related at all. Yeah. And I just delete every email without reading it because I'm just not, yes, you could earn a quick buck and do a brand integration, but it's a very difficult balance to strike. So, for me, relationships that can help me create content and support me funding the making of that content, that's super, super important for me. And actually working with brands, I'm more about what content can I get out of this and how interesting and diverse can it be? And then the financial side of things are secondary to that, even though they're probably the most important bit because they allow you to focus on creating your content.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an element that's slightly different with let's say advertising on a podcast, because fundamentally they're not necessarily, they can help you create content, and actually with the market and Bonham stuff, we are gonna do some content, but it's finding the sort of affinity with the right people and all of that, because the amount of effort involved in finding this stuff and putting it together, and then you stress about it, and then you're like, actually this one doesn't fit that well, or like it does, but I'd rather do it long term or do some, a different structure. And they're like, no, we need you to do this video. I find like psychologically you do that and it eats away at you a little bit. And like over time, you're just like, and your audience is aware, they pick this stuff up and they're like, that person will advertise anything. And
yes. And I don't want to be that guy. I've seen other channels do it and I don't want to be that guy.
No, and I think the long-term value...
I've tried a few integrations. I did one. I wasn't massively comfortable with it. It was for a share trading app. And the reason I didn't like it was because it was an FSA regulated thing. There was a whole script that you had to kind of nail word for word. And it just jarred me a little bit. So I that put me off. So yeah, it's an interesting one. And I get it. I get why, the comments I find most difficult to deal with sometimes, they just wind me up, is when someone says, oh, I watched your video and there was loads of adverts in it. And I'm like,
free, mate.
You're watching it for free. If you don't want the adverts, pay for YouTube Premium, and, or skip the adverts, but you're watching it for free. You watch a TV show on ITV for free and have an advert every 15 minutes without complaining. It's exactly the same model. And I 1 20-minute video for me is probably a day's filming and 6 to 8 hours of editing, 3 times a week. So you've got to fund it somehow,
and you've got to fund your life and whatever and all that stuff. And
exactly.
I think a lot of these things have their place, and I think most people will not necessarily market. They'll do smaller things when they're smaller because that's what you can get, and you're like, actually, I like this company, and we'll only do one video and whatever. Like you've got to make the money somehow. But then longer term, I think most people, or the sensible ones, have a more like, let's try and work. You're pitching for those bigger deals. It takes more time. I've personally found meeting people face to face and having a relationship face to face delivers deals rather than an email. It can work, but like that's kind of how I'm focusing a lot of my time now is meeting people and building these relationships so that when if something comes up, they're like, yeah, let's do it, and it's not going to be a pain in the ass, and you'll get paid and like all that stuff.
And you've got to, I've got some amazing partners that help me with the channel, and the Bonhams in the market of the latest of that. Hendy's is I've worked with the Hendy group for nearly 12 months now, amazingly supportive, and again that was an agreement where I get a long-term car from them on every 2 to 3 months, and for me the importance of that is I get to sometimes you'll get a press car, it'll be a day, 2 days, a week if you're lucky. You can learn a lot about a car in a week, but you really want it for longer than that. So I can have a Hendy car for 2 or 3 months and really get to grips with the ownership experience and create content based on that. So that's the attraction of that partnership. So yeah, it is, you're right, the longer term ones they're important, and the real challenge is you pitch the idea and you come up with the benefits for both parties, and then you've got to deliver. And that's the bit that keeps me awake at night sometimes, because you think, oh no, I've done a video and it's not performed or whatever. And, it's a real pressure, whenever you do some kind of, monetize yourself, there's a pressure. It's like when you go on even today when I go on a press launch, if I get a brand fly me, it was really interesting. I'm listening to your podcast with a guy from Toyota, and to hear the press team's side of things and the cost associated. Good. He was really, really useful for me as someone who deals with that type of team. But the costs of delivering a press car for a week, that shocked me. Or the cost of flying a bunch of journalists out to another country to test drive a car. There's you need to justify that, and you need to come up with a story. And I found that podcast fascinating. And by the way, I then emailed him and came up with a story about a hydrogen fuel cell car and went and drove the Mirai, which was amazing.
Nice. So this is a guy called James Clark. He's head of Toyota and Lexus marketing PR. One of those. Anyway, he's got all the press stuff. And we had a really good chat, and I asked him all the kind of honest questions that I think people don't ask. Like, what happens if I crash it? Or like, all these sorts of things. And he was super, super, super honest. I find it really interesting that manufacturers still do, and I totally understand because it's the way they've done it, but I'm kind of amazed they still do these press launches. I know they kind of have to do some kind of launch. But I'm surprised there aren't more just like, here's the car, it's going to turn up on your drive. I guess secrecy is an element, but let's say that for the UK people, just do a UK one. I don't know, maybe the cost isn't so much more.
I think there's a bit of legacy. I think that the legacy, what I'd call the proper journalists that are there, that's kind of how they've done things. And, actually as a YouTuber, some of those press launches, wonderful as they are to go on, they're actually really, really hard because you have to create content, and the routes that are plugged into your sat nav, you've not recce'd them, you don't know them, and you've got, you've got to create a video in a day and think of a story that no one else is doing. And I don't want people to feel sorry for me, by the way, because I know it's wonderful and really cool, but it's a lot of pressure, to try and get a video made in a day and make it quality, and you've got to learn the car in like an hour and understand it and try and come up with some kind of commentary about it. But no, that for me, and I'm not fanboying here, but I've listened to pretty much every podcast you did. In fact, the reason I'm here today is I messaged Sam and went, Sam, you need to do some more podcasts because I've ran out. I'm going back and re-listening to them again because I listen to them whenever I'm on a long journey. But that one, I really enjoyed that podcast. I found it, for me as a car YouTuber, super, super interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot of
very useful
people that are interested in like whether the journalist side or maybe content creators, we were very much like spelled out like all of the stuff that you need to know, ask, whatever.
If you're an aspiring YouTuber, I mean, I have people all the time say, "How do you get a car? How do you get a car for a week?" Well, you ask and you come up with a story and you have an audience and so on. By the way, I need to ask you about a couple of cars that you've driven recently. I know it's your podcast and you're asking me.
Go for it. But I don't mind.
The Morgan Super 3.
I have not driven it.
Oh, were you just there looking at pictures or looking at the car?
No,
you were there the other day. Oh, you didn't get to drive it.
Mobility thing. It's not. You can't drive it. It's like a VP1.
Oh, I thought you'd driven it. Oh man. Oh, good.
No,
that makes me feel better because I was really jealous. I want to drive that because that looks wicked.
It's really cool. And they had, so it was at Morgan Works, which is their London showroom.
Yeah.
It's in a Muse. And I'd messaged about doing this podcast with the head of design for Morgan about the car. And I wanted to just, ask all the questions, etc. And they're like, well, you can go and see it. It's in the showroom. So I just went to the showroom and I had arranged, but you could go. Like it was there for a week. No one knew it was there, but if you happened to walk past, you would see the new Super 3. And they had one of the old ones next to it. And after having a look around the new one for like 5 minutes, we went and had a look at the old one. And the old one suddenly looks like some sort of relic. Like you first see the new one, like, this looks a bit weird. Then you go see the old one, and then you come back to the new one and then look round it. And there's so many elements of the what do you call it? It's not a car, vehicle thing, three-wheeler, I guess.
Fun machine.
Fun machine, exactly. There's so many elements about the design and stuff that are all about making it better to drive, making it better to use, more storage, like all of this sort of stuff that if you've driven the old one, even things like the old one, the exhaust went down the side and you go, that's fun. It's fun until you burn your like calf on it when you get out. And like, I think anyone that's been near a three-wheeler has probably got very, very close to getting seriously burnt on their leg.
It just looks wicked. I mean, I watched
really cool.
the car affection video this morning. The panniers that you can clip on the side and the back. It just looks brilliant. So I'm having recently driven +4 and +6 as a result of listening to the podcast.
What did you think of them?
They're both stunning cars. I really enjoyed driving them. +4 for me, it was the manual one I drove, which I liked, but I think it would probably quite quickly not have enough power for me. And I know it's not about power, but I'd want a little bit more oomph. The +6 has all the oomph, but it's got a flappy paddle ZF gearbox, and my brain, when I'm sat in a classic Morgan, my brain could not get over changing gear with paddles. I wanted a manual gearbox in that car. I know it changes gear brilliantly and all that kind of stuff, but for me, that car has to be a manual. Just for me and what I want from a car. I want to heel and toe and engage with the car.
Yeah.
It was ballistically quick and fun, and it could do with a diff as well, to be honest, because they've both got own diffs. But I love them. I love them. Really, really cool. And as a Caterham owner, it has a lot of the kind of Caterham-esque thing. But
it does, doesn't it?
I would quite happily take my wife away for the weekend in a Morgan to a nice hotel. I probably wouldn't do that in a Caterham.
No, Caterham would feel it seems too extreme, I think. And I thought it was really interesting. I drove them +6 not a while ago, I think, not too long after it had come out, when they'd had a road car and stuff. And it was this kind of crazy turbo experience, but in a car that, for me, it didn't really feel like it could handle it. Like it was a bit sketchy. But then I drove the +4 probably a year later or whenever that was, and had it for 4 days or something at home, and really liked it. Like, I think a huge part of it was the manual gearbox, just the way it worked with the car and whatnot. I would have a +4 over a +6 personally.
And as someone said, you can always, because it's a BMW engine, you can always just put a chip on it, or just give it a bit more oomph with a new map.
Yeah, if you wanted a bit more. I thought it was a really nice, like, fun experience. And you kind of have to go to the factory, look around the factory, see how they're made, and then you get in the cars and you drive the car, and you're like, it's a Morgan, it's not a Cayman GT4.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
they're all hand built.
The craftsmanship. I mean, I did the whole factory tour and then drove them back to back all on the same day, and it was mega. It was a really, really cool. And actually, anybody can go to the factory and have a tour. Anybody, you can hire one of the cars, so you could go down and have a factory tour and drive one around the Malverns in the afternoon and have a great day out. I
recommend that.
Yeah,
I would take a 3-wheeler. I would take a Super 3 when you can do that with a Super 3 or one of the others.
Wait to drive. I've never driven the original 3-wheeler, so I wouldn't know, but I can't wait to drive that car. So
understeer, oversteer. That's a 3-wheeler in a nutshell.
Excellent. Sounds like a recipe for fun. And then the other car you've driven recently, which just looked, frankly, quite ridiculously awesome, was the new Radical, the SR10.
Yes.
Oh, mate.
Have you driven anything like that at all?
No. No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah. So
and I watched that video and thought, well, it's got aero. So if you're not used to driving an aero car, I'd imagine it's quite a big step to go straight into that. But it did look awesome.
It took me quite a long. I had 3 sessions, 3 30-minute sessions, and really I should have. This is when the blend of filming and not filming and stuff comes in, because if you arrive, you've got to check in, whatever, do your stuff, then you chat to everyone, and then you've got to film some stuff, then drive the car, and then you've got the amount of time that your session is, I think maybe 45 minutes or something like that in between your sessions. And to get out the car, do a little debrief, film a video, go to the loo, eat a little bit of food, have a drink, and then like be back in the car again, so filming and back in the car. Like you don't actually have very much time to really like decompress and think about.
No.
And looking back at it now, I would have, just for me personally, it would have been really beneficial if I'd sat down with the driver coach at the very beginning. I don't think he'd driven that car around that track. So had said, okay, I'm going to sacrifice 10 minutes of my first 30-minute session, but I want you to go out and do a really go flat out. And then I want you to come back and we're going to sit down in the next break and talk about how we're approaching every corner. Because I've driven that track in an SR3, which is the race car I have, but only like once in a test day. And I don't really remember much about it, but it was a bit like, I think first corner is like 4th, I can't remember. Whereas if you said Silverstone, where I've done a lot more, in a 3, I know each corner, exactly where the braking point is, exactly where the turn-in point is, how much throttle, how much braking, what the brake curve looks like. So whether it's like high initial and then like off, or gradual, or a little, various shapes and whatnot, and like park throttle, and all of these things get you so that I can get quite quickly, let's say Silverstone, up to the fastest time I'm capable of. Whereas dropping into a new car where the speedo wasn't working, which I think the GPS, there's something about the GPS wasn't working at that point in time. So I had no speedo, I just had gears, which you're arriving at a corner and you're like, I think I'm going really fast, but I have no idea of the gearing. So the corner 1 at Snetterton, I was at the top of 5th, like on the limiter pretty much, and you can pull into 6th. And I was like, I know I need to slow down, but normally I don't slow down that much for this corner. So you slow down a bit, and then you go around the corner and you're like, okay, maybe I could go faster, but I don't know. Looking back, I got the gearing, the technical information for the gearing, and the top of 5th is like 170 miles an hour. So
yeah, get that wrong.
So
that's
you need to slow down to like 125 or something for that corner. So you're doing a lot of braking. But that would have been, I think, if I'd spent more time doing that. But basically, a crazy experience. SR3s on tracks are mental, but they hit as you get faster, they slow down and they kind of top out at about 130 or 35 or something like that, because they've not got enough horsepower to overtake the downforce at that speed. Whereas the SR10 has double the horsepower pretty much, a chunk more torque, it's a turbocharged engine, and it just keeps pulling and pulling and pulling, and it will go up to like 175 or something. Wow. So, and it's got the similar aero, similar balance, a little bit less weight. So what I was finding was I was approaching corners at Snetterton. There's another corner, I think it might be called Hamilton. It's on the like infield. You do a hairpin left.
I've not driven Snet, so I don't know.
Okay, you do like a hairpin left, and then there's like a fast kind of left, and they put a barrel there. At Snetterton, they seem to love putting barrels on corners that you've got to dodge. And I was always braking really heavily to sort of slow down to a speed that I thought was about right, and then pitching the car in. And basically what I was doing was braking too hard, and then coming off, sort of too hard, and then trying to turn the car. And the aero platform, so the car basically needs to be level, or somewhat level, for the aero to work underneath. If you're smash the brakes, the front goes down, the back goes up, you mess the aero a bit, and then you try and turn in, and it's not got that much downforce, and the back tries to swap with the front.
Which isn't good.
So towards the end of the session, I was working on braking the same. Let's say we've got a graph where you brake really hard at the beginning and then you tailor off towards the end. Same area under curve, so same amount of speed reduction, but over a longer period of time. So you brake softer for longer.
Right, okay.
Which might seem counterintuitive generally if you're like, well, I want to hit the brakes as hard as possible, scrub off to the speed that I want to go in the corner as quickly as possible, and then go around the corner. In a car that's heavily aeroed, like GT3 cars, I think are the same, these radicals, etc. The first 2/3 or a third of the braking is about shedding a lot of speed, but then the next bit is all about setting up the balance of the car for the next corner.
Right, okay.
So you're very like managing that bit of how you come off the brakes to get the car somewhat flat. Then you've got maximum downforce, and then when you go around the corner, it all feels super smooth and super grippy and all that stuff. So it's absolutely mental driving that car.
What I love about talking things like that is that when you watch TV, especially if you're watching Formula One or any of these kind of race series where they've got aero, is you for me, the thing, whenever I've done any driver coaching or spoken to any top-end race driver, is the thing that just impresses me immensely, and I know I haven't got it, which makes it more impressive, is the bandwidth that they have to be able to deal with not just driving a car fast, but deal with all the other stuff, the braking, the bleeding the speed off, the aero balance, the managing tires, the getting on the throttle. At the same time, you're probably changing a map on the steering wheel or your brake bias or something. And then being able to come back in and recount all of that almost turn by turn, gear shift by gear shift. And I just think that it's incredible.
It's incredibly impressive.
When I did my racing a couple of years ago in a Clio, but I had 2 days with a driver coach, and on one of the sessions he said, right, I want you to go out for 5 laps and then come back and tell me about it. So I went out for 5 laps, came back in, and he said, how was it? I said, well, it was all right. He went, no, tell me about it. Right, so as you approach turn 1, and he wanted me to talk through those 5 laps, almost 50 feet by 50 feet. And I said, Mark, I haven't got that in my head.
It takes, like you said, it's the bandwidth. And that's something about, let's say you go, it's why you can go to somewhere, a track, your local track, any track, and you can go and you ask someone that's done like 5 laps, and you're like, how is it? How well do you know, let's say Silverstone? They're like, yeah, pretty good. Like, I know this is a left, that's a right. You ask someone that's done like 500 laps, and they're like, pretty good. Like, pretty good. But like, I'm not sure. And they'll talk about the texture on the curbing, little bits of like polished, you know, this particular curb, if I go over that part of it, there's a bit more grip than this part, and then you change it in the wet and whatever, and the sort of the resolution of the track goes up and up and up and up and up over time. But one of the things I found about, let's say, not having driven, if I haven't driven my SR3 in a long time, it's my bandwidth is massively reduced because you're just not used to the G-force, what it can do. And then whenever you drive a new car at a track, and I think it's one of the reasons why if you get to drive, let's say a Ferrari, it might be an F8 at Goodwood, and you've got 3 laps and there's an instructor next to you, there's a reason they give you like 3 laps.
Yeah.
Not 10. And it's because you're so out of your comfort zone for 3 laps that you don't push that unless you're mental. Yeah. And like you're still getting used to the speed and the brake and like I've got to go left and I've got to go right and whatever, that you never really push that car that hard and they get their car back. Yeah. If they gave you 15 laps, people start to push. They start to get confident and then they put it in a wall.
yeah, which isn't not a good thing. Not a good thing.
But yeah, it's an interesting one. The SR10 as a track day, it's a race car, so you can go race it. But if you wanted to buy a track day car and you wanted the ultimate, like, fastest thing, I would say an SR3 is great, but on a track day, it's not very good because it doesn't have the straight line pace. It's not slow, but it doesn't have the straight line pace from, let's say, 80 miles an hour up to overtake fast cars. Like, the stuff you see on a high-end track day, 911 Turbo, 720S, all that sort of stuff. SR10 has the aero to do the corners crazy fast and brake really late because it only weighs like 700 kilos or whatever. But it has the punch and the power to weight to keep pulling so that you can pull up next to an R8 on the straights and just put your foot down and you are going past it. And you're going faster anyway coming out the corner. So then you're the first person to the next corner.
Yeah.
Which means you can attack the corner how you want. Whereas often, it's maybe if you're in a Caterham or something light, something kind of quick, but that's not that fast on a straight, you get to the corner and there's some absolute bleep in there, in whatever, that's gone down the straights at 180 miles an hour, slammed on the brakes, and then is going 50 miles an hour around what is a 100-mile-an-hour corner, and you're not allowed to overtake them.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas in your SR10, you just gone. No, I mean that's a radical SR10.
Yeah, it looks good. It looks good. I've done
monster experience.
I don't know if you see. I'm doing some stuff at the moment with Nichols Automotive. I don't know if you've seen the Nichols M1A car.
I saw something.
So just do a Google for Nichols M1A because this is your kind of car. Because one of the things listening to your podcast is one of your recurring themes is lightweight cars, right? You love your lightweight cars. So
look at
the
this.
Nichols M1A. So it was designed by Steve Nichols, who was the chief designer of the McLaren MP44, the most successful Formula One car of all time. But it's a kind of modern day homage to the McLaren M1A, but it's 900 kilos, and they've got a range of different engine options. So the car that if you're watching online, that's their prototype. So their first production car is going to be literally just the next couple of weeks. I'm going to see the chassis next week. And they're putting an LS7 7-litre Chevy V8 in the back of that with 610, 620 horsepower, and it weighs 900 kilos.
That's going to be mental.
6-speed manual box, and it's based around loads of torque. It's based around a bonded and extruded aluminium chassis, bit of carbon fibre in there, but beautiful thing. So I've done. The first video, I've just done an interview with John Minot, who's the MD of Nichols Cars, and Steve Nichols, the designer. I tell you, if you just had a beer in a pub, you could sit down and chat with that guy forever because he's got so many amazing stories. He worked with Senna and Prost, and he worked with John Barnard bringing carbon fiber into Formula One. He obviously worked on the design of the MP44. He then went to Ferrari, I think, and worked in a number of other kind of Formula One teams. But amazing stories, absolutely amazing stories. But that car, that's going to be right up your street when it's done, because it's.
So is this going to be a road car?
It's a road legal track car. It will be road legal. Wow. Yeah. So
that sounds nuts.
I know. And they've got the suspension setup was from I can't remember his name now off the top of my head. Well, the big suspension guru from Lotus. He left Lotus about 3 years ago. So he's done all the suspension and geometry. The chassis been designed by the guy who was responsible for the kind of Lotus use of bonded and extruded aluminium, and then he went and consulted for Land Rover and did their chassis when they went to aluminium. So yeah, amazing dream team almost of designers, but yeah, really cool. So as I said,
what's it going to cost?
I don't know, and I don't. Well, I don't know.
Tell you, or you don't know?
I still think they're kind of working out what that number's going to be. It's not going to be a kind of £1 billion. It's going to be a few £100,000, I think. But they're pretty much one-off, so you can have anything you want. They've got a choice of engines from, I think the prototype car, that's got an LS2, about 500 and something horsepower. They're all big V8, big Chevy V8s, basically. They're kind of like an homage to the old Can-Am cars.
Yeah, they sort of look like
that. But they've got modern day wheels with a modern day tire profile, big brakes, underneath those tires. So it's going to be a proper bit of kit, that's for sure. So
I think there's a lot to be said for those sorts of vehicles for the Sunday early morning when no one's around, wake up all your neighbours type situation, or
your neighbours and
take it to a track.
Like that.
yeah, and put the hammer down on some stuff. Like, are those sorts of powertrains? What's another one that you see every now and then? I saw my first one. It's like a
not the Ultima,
not like this, but a kit car, an Ultima. Yeah.
I
saw my first Ultima RS.
Yeah,
which had a LS something in it with like 700 horsepower or something like that. And you're like, yeah, but surely that's going to be, like in reality, that's going to be too much for a road situation.
The interesting thing, so at the moment, there's no driver aids on that car at all. They even took power steering off because it gave better feel. But I think they are going to have the option of you'll be able to option a kind of traction control, stability control system on it. But if you buy it, it comes with driver training and stuff, so you can, just in case you're not used to that kind of immense power in a car that weighs 900. In fact, they think when the car, because the prototype is based on a proprietary tubular steel chassis, so the car that we'll see, they're going to do the shakedown in a few months' time. I'll be there documenting it for the channel, but that car could be less than 900 kilos. So
that's pretty bonkers.
I know.
I love these sorts of projects. Like, I love that we're seeing, these things are out there. People are making the stuff, and
we can, right?
Sell a few. Yeah, exactly. I saw I did an interview with one of the guys from BRM.
Oh wow!
About their V16.
Yeah.
Recently. Have you seen one of those?
Probably at Goodwood, I think, maybe. Was that a Formula car? Or was that, yeah,
it never did.
V16.
It never did very well.
Yeah.
But they basically, I didn't know much about BRM until chatting to this guy. Like, I didn't know much about them.
I had a Yardley BRM Scale Electrics car as a kid because my brothers were obsessed with BRM.
Nice.
So, yeah.
My Scale Electrics was a F40 and a XJ220.
Excellent.
And then I think I had some others, but like those came as the kit.
And you ended up owning an F40. That's got to be the coolest thing ever. You ended up owning the Scale Electrics car you had as a kid. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I definitely made that F40 like jump on the Scale Electrics track. I did not do that with the real thing.
No.
But yeah, no, so that was it. I talking to them about that car. I didn't realize that for them it was kind of like an engineering exercise of British excellence.
Yeah.
So these things were built like a fine watch, but in car form.
Yeah.
Like the whatever Speedo had 200 parts in it when most Speedos had 5 parts in them, because they're like, let's over-engineer this in far too many ways.
Yeah.
It's sort of really cool. There's so many sort of things like that out there. I need to go and drive some more. I'm going to drive the E-Type UK V12 Unleashed.
Oh wow!
Don't know if you come across that.
No,
it's like a resto mod, not quite resto mod. Like one of the E-Types, like a V12 E-Type. So what's that type? What are they called? Version 3.
Yeah,
but they're
Series 3.
Series 3.
Yeah,
Series 3. That's what they're called. But kind of like taken up and all the random stuff fixed and all of that stuff, and then you get a silly price. Like, well, it's not silly when you consider the amount of effort, but 300-400 grand or something like that. So
I drove my first E-Type not that long ago, and it was a Series 1 2+2. So as the owner said, it's the least desirable of the most desirable, because it's the kind of bubbly back end, but beautiful thing to drive, so smooth. But that for me, that's this year is definitely drive as many oddball cool cars as possible. I often don't like talking about what I'm going to drive or things I've got planned in the future, in case I jinx it and it doesn't happen. But
that's true. I haven't driven this thing yet, so
yeah. But I am in the process of planning. In fact, I booked my flights yesterday. I've been invited to Italy, to Pagani, to have a look around the Pagani factory in Italy. And I am hoping very much that I'm going to get to drive the Wyra BC Roadster. Yeah,
nice. So, well, that would be pretty sick.
Yeah, I know. Although I'm massively intimidated, but yeah, it's. But yeah, so those types of things, you work in the background trying to get contact companies and get access to stuff. But you seem to be you're very good. I guess it's extending your reach to get guests on the podcast of getting access to some of the things you've done, some of the cars you've driven, the resto mod really stuff especially.
I now have over here. I'm not going to show it, but a big whiteboard that's. I don't know how big it is. It's like a couple of foot across, 3 foot across by 4 foot down or something. Yeah. And it is full of the column in the left is people to contact. So like people I kind of, want to get in touch with. And then the next column is like in the process or have sent a message to. And then it's like, have we agreed anything? Have they replied or whatever? And I'm like there with
one of those. Brilliant
pen.
Idea.
And it's easily 50 or 60 people down, and that's in the first list of people I wanted to talk with, and it's easily the same in the we're in the process of that. But like getting from you've sent a message and they've replied to recording is not easy. No. Like it can be easy. Certain people, great, but like that I spend far too much time. No, I think I spend the right amount of time, but just trying to put them together.
Yeah,
and it gets easier over time. But I think that's probably like you with like booking cars and things. Like why, if you can tie up with someone that can possibly provide, whether it's one car a month or whatever it is, then at least you've got probably one car a month you don't have to worry about.
Yeah, it's a heartbeat. I mean, I do an update video, but 2 videos a week. So you've always got to have this kind of constant. And I've just come back from holiday, so my 2edit file on my computer is empty. So I'm literally hand to mouth at the moment. So I'm filming tomorrow, and that's Friday's video, and it's Wednesday now. So that's never a good place to be in. You must be the same. It's you must have to have some banked and recorded, and That just takes the pressure off so much, because all you need is a bad weather day or a car fail. I mean, I had a couple of really cool cars I was due to film earlier this year, and both cancelled. One was a historic car, and that failed to start the day before. They couldn't get the car working, so we had to can that, and then that puts you out totally.
Yeah, and it's getting cancellations. Like occasionally for me, for some reason or other, someone, let's say, can't do a podcast, or we had bad weather. Like the first time I went to drive this E-Type, it then torrential rain, and it was a customer's car, and it was like, let's not like get this all. It was like ready to be shipped. Like let's not just do this. But you know, you lose half a day, and then with the podcast, sometimes people can't do it because you're generally trying to get some of the most important people from whoever, sometimes stuff comes up.
In awe of some of the people you've had on here, you know, from Christian von Koenigsegg to, you know, some of
personal highlight.
That was amazing. I was like, when that came up on the list, I'm like, he's got Christian von Koenigsegg. Wow, okay, I'm listening to this, because I mean, that guy, from an engineering point of view, I think that company do some of the most unbelievable stuff. I mean, I just want to know more about the free valve technology and stuff in a Koenigsegg than I do, because you learn, the more you learn about it, the more you realize you don't actually really understand most of it, because it's so complex. But,
and you're like, why is this not in all combustion engines? And like, if we weren't, let's say, everything's been turned around to say we're doing EVs now. If the sort of sideline of you might be able to do combustion engines, depending on what they run on, was allowed to continue, things like that. Because I think with the Gemera, however you say it, that engine is like, it's quite a lot more efficient than any other combustion engine. By an amount that people, I don't know what the amount is, but even if it was 10%, that's significantly more than people have gained. Like, you look at engines for the last 20 years, they're not twice as efficient. They might be, but like, they're not really. Like,
no, they're only in there.
You're not getting 100 mpg out of a V8.
About 30% efficiency, 40% at best from an internal combustion engine.
Yeah.
Whereas electric motor, 95% efficiency. I mean, that was the interesting when I drove the Mirai, the hydrogen car, and that, you know, don't get me wrong, hydrogen has its challenges creating it in the first place. But what that car did for me was just make me think, well, why is the narrative so focused around one particular solution being a battery electric vehicle? Why aren't we? I mean, not just, you know, I think the government, the car industry, the population of people buying cars, we kind of need to just have a bit more of an open dialogue. I think it needs to be a mix of BEVs, hybrids. I know you hate hybrids, but I'm a big plug-in hybrid fan.
I don't hate them. I just think they're not the best solution yet. They
are
what they are.
So the reason I brought I think they nearly are. So I'm running a plug-in hybrid at the moment, and for me, for my lifestyle, if it was just for Tracy, my wife, going to work and back, I'd buy a mini electric, a bit like your little Peugeot, 120 odd miles of range. Perfect car. I've got a 7 kilowatt charger at home. That would be perfect, because she never does more than, I don't know, 15, 20 miles a day. And you could go shopping in and stuff. Brilliant. The problem is, if you want to go a bit further than that, you could go full blown BEV, but 250 miles, 300 miles, depending on which one you buy, is probably the kind of range you're looking at. Most of the time for me, that would be great, but I do quite a lot of miles. So I do regularly journeys of more than 250 miles in a day. And as soon as you do that, as soon as you go beyond the range of a car, you're then at the mercy of charging infrastructure and finding somewhere to charge it at night time.
Totally.
The reason why I love the plug-in hybrid, and we've got a Toyota RAV4 at the moment, that will do 40 miles pure electric. So for the Tracy going to work and back, we just plug it in every night. She never fires up the internal combustion engine. But if I want to go 250 miles to 300 miles, I just run it as a hybrid, and it does 55 miles to the gallon. So if it was just a one car, that would be me.
Yep.
But with one caveat,
100%.
I want a PHEV that does 100 miles pure electric. The only problem with that is then you've got the batteries and the weight and all that kind of stuff. And I understand that's why they don't do them. But then, you could go...
We're starting to see 60 miles.
Yeah, that kind of
like
number for me
aren't they?
gets exciting then. And I think a hybrid is a really, really, it ticks lots of boxes.
Yeah. I don't know why we don't... I think Mercedes did it, didn't they? We don't really get many hybrid diesels.
Never quite understood that.
When
I'm wondering whether it's the transition between the two, maybe, I don't know. Firing up a diesel and
I think
turning
it's
it
pure... I don't know, but I think it's like the marketing spin.
Yeah.
Like diesels are just not an accepted thing anymore.
No.
People are like, I'm not buying a diesel. Just not doing
Yeah.
it. Even though people do, it's like not, it's like you should buy an electric car, you should definitely not buy a diesel.
So last year I drove the Jaguar F-Pace 3-litre diesel. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What an amazing car. Beautiful engine. I like silky smooth, loads of torque. Brilliant thing. Really good miles per gallon. It was a brilliant car, but it's a diesel, so no one will want to buy it. Because especially nowadays, because the diesel's at like £1.80 a litre or something.
If you've listened to a lot of the podcasts, you will have heard this side of it. My problem with the hybrids, if it's kind of like a car to get you around, then maybe you don't mind. But for me, all of the hybrids I've driven, the plug-in hybrids, the electric powertrain, if you're driving on electric only, is a pretty rubbish electric powertrain experience because they've got no power whatsoever. They're not no power, but they're not very quick.
Yeah.
And if you're buying it depends where you're pitching it.
Yeah.
If it's like I've bought a nice sporty car and it's a plug-in hybrid and I'm going to do that, you're carrying around maybe a great sounding, usually not these days, but great sounding heavy engine that you don't get to enjoy.
Yeah.
And you've got really rubbish EV performance.
Yeah.
That you're using all the time. So why not just get... I just feel like they're just not quite...
I do...
The small Toyota Yaris hybrid that's non-plug-in or whatever that will do like 80 mpg all day long everywhere. Totally. Brilliant.
Yeah.
But and I see how it works for a lot of people. But they're really heavy.
Yeah, they are. And I guess, so the RAV I've got at the moment, I think the electric motor is about 120 horsepower, something like that. So it's not around town, for city driving, it's fine. And it'll do over 80 miles an hour on pure electric. So it's not one of these ones where you push it too hard and the petrol engine kicks in. It will stay in EV mode. But yeah, I do get it. And I think it's just, I guess if you can have multiple cars, and an electric car for me, if you for us having a small city electric car for the daily commute and shopping and that type of stuff, and then something else, a family wagon, either a hybrid or a big V8 or something.
Yeah, it's tricky, guys. I think we're very much in a transition period, and I think for most people, if you want to have, let's say, less emissions in town or something like that, then a plug-in hybrid makes sense. But I feel like in 5 years' time, plug-in hybrids will be replaced by better electric cars, and you'll get them with more range, and it's just going to be a better car. And at the moment, you could just have a petrol or a diesel that's significantly more efficient than this plug-in hybrid, realistically. Maybe not in town. So that's the balance.
Yeah.
And just wait and then do the change. But
the bit,
I get it.
I haven't, I've only seen the Mercedes, what was it? The concept EV that they bought out last year that would do like 500 odd miles or something. That was the first manufacturer that I can openly saying they bought out an EV, and it wasn't all about 0 to 60 times and power, and it was about economy and range. And you drive most electric cars are so powerful and so quick, they don't need to be. If you paired them back and gave them, I can't believe I'm saying this, it makes me sound like such an old fuddy-duddy, but a couple of 100 horsepower and just two-wheel drive, they'd probably go on a 100 kilowatt battery pack, they'd go twice as far. They don't need to be that fast. They don't need to have that much performance. If range is what you want, if you pared the power back a bit, then potentially you're going to get the range that everyone is crying after.
Now, I'm not sure of the science and physics of it, but let's say if you just look at like the Teslas at the moment, they're like the ones that do the furthest range. What are they? Are they a single motor car with the biggest battery? Does that do the most range, or does a dual motor car with the biggest battery do the most range?
They've all got dual motors, I think, haven't they? The 3 and the Y have, because they've both got dual motors. But one, I think it's just about the power. The long range one, they pare the power back a bit. I know the Mustang Mach-E does.
And then, like, let's say you've got a motor, and you could put a bigger one in, a more powerful motor. Running that motor flat out in terms of like how much power you're using versus a slightly bigger one, but at the reduced level.
Yeah, I reckon we're building up another podcast. I need my mate Moggy on. He'd know.
Like, I don't know the answer to that question. Like,
the car I always give a Porsche Taycan is for me one of the best EVs I've driven because it kind of feels like a Porsche, but the best Taycan is the cheapest one, the rear wheel drive one. Yeah. It's still faster than most people would ever need, and it's much cheaper. It's like 85 plus options, something like that kind of number. It's still ballistically quick. My finance advisor's got one, and he loves it, and it still frightens him. It's so quick. So I don't know. I don't know. I think we've fallen into this trap as a manufacturers and stuff. Every new car that comes out has to have more horsepower than the next one, and actually, for me, one of the things I've learned is when I first started YouTube, I wanted to drive the most powerful car ever, and now actually 3 or 400 horsepower, any more than that, and actually they become so fast you can't exploit it anyway. One of my favorite cars I've driven is an Aston Martin GT8 Vantage, 400 horsepower, manual gearbox,
quite slow,
not that quick. Sounds amazing,
not that quick at all.
But just a sense of theatre and drama, and you could take it down a B road, spank it, and not be doing 1,000,000 miles an hour. And I got out of that car and just buzzing. Yeah, it wasn't actually that quick. And the thing that people criticise the car for, or it's not that fast, or it's not that powerful, was the thing I loved about it the most, because that's probably why I like
the experience of a GTA. I've driven Tim's a while ago. It's like, wow, this is a real V8 experience. But I personally did think it was not quite fast enough. For its weight, it's quite heavy, all that. But fine. I didn't get to spend very much time with it and really bond and whatnot. But your point about efficiency, I think it sort of slightly go back to the EVs but actually all cars, is we get these figures quoted, and with EVs we get, what's the range? And then someone will come out, what's that new car that's come out that's got the most range? It's by a company that hasn't made any cars yet.
So the range is just a fantasy then.
No. I think it's not Rivian. It's the other one. It's the it's like a saloon car.
Yeah. I know the one you mean.
Looks like, and it looks nice. They've got loads of great people involved in it, whatever. And they're like, it's the first car that will do 500 miles range. And I think Elon Musk came out recently and said, look, if we'd wanted to make a 500-mile car, we could have done it a year ago or 2 years ago, but we didn't want to put 150, whatever it is, 150 kilowatt hour battery in a car, which is the way that they've done it.
Yeah.
Yes, it's efficient to some extent, but the thing that never gets talked about, and it's very easy to see in an EV, is the efficiency of the car.
Yeah.
People look at it MPG, that is efficiency, but no one really seems to compete too much on it.
Yeah.
Whereas with an EV, I think you focus on it more, because it really does make the difference between whether you get home or not. And someone that's bought a Taycan, for example, they're really not very efficient. They're more efficient than a petrol car or whatever. But like, you compare it to directly, let's say my little Peugeot. Tim, I think in his Taycan Turbo S used to get 2.5 miles per kilowatt hour. In my Peugeot, I get 3.8.
Yep.
Ish. That sort of amount. So not quite double, but we're getting towards double on the same charge.
A Kia EV6, you're going to be up at 4, maybe nearly 5.
Really?
Yeah. And because I always get it and go 2. I mean, because you can do the maths in your head, right? So, if you've got 100, I have to make maths easy, but if you've got a 100 kilowatt battery pack and you're doing, because this is, again, for people who haven't got an EV, you learn all of these new numbers and all of these new metrics very quickly. Right? What a 7 kilowatt charger as well. If you're on a 50 kilowatt charger, that's easy because that's like the beginning of fast charging public infrastructure. If you have a 100 kilowatt battery pack, a 50 kilowatt charger will charge it in 2 hours ish. Yeah. It's not quite.
It won't in reality, but that's the dream.
Yeah, that's
the simple stuff.
The first 10% and the last 10% take longer. But anyway, but yeah, the miles per kilowatt. So if you're doing 2.5 miles per kilowatt hour and you've got a 100 kilowatt battery pack, you're going to do 250 miles to a full charge. That's your numbers, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. You get in some of these cars and. Audi's the same. The e-trons, I think they're quite poor, really. I would expect them to be 3 or 4, maybe, but very rarely do you get a car that's more than 3. And I know it depends on where you drive it as well. So the most efficient, it's funny. One of the things that people watching YouTube probably don't realize, but you probably get it with your channel as well, is when you put something on the internet, everybody marks you on it, whether in terms of whether you're right or wrong, and points out your inefficiencies and the things that you've done incorrectly. Yeah. So the most inefficient thing you can do with an EV is sit on a motorway in cruise control at 60 or 70 miles an hour. You think in a petrol car
that's flat out.
In a petrol car that's 60 miles an hour cruise control. That's as efficient as you can be. In an EV, that's not. So you have to drive them in a different way. But the efficiency, the way you drive it, that you have to learn to drive it differently, and I know range isn't everything. I know the 400, 500 mile range thing isn't everything. Charging infrastructure and being able to quickly top up 20 or 30 minutes of charge and carry on your way, that's what's important. But
it's an interesting one. So you're saying the Kia is between 4 and 5.
Kia was pretty good when I had it.
And there's that mixed use.
Yeah, I mean, I only had it. I had it for a day, so it's not a very indicative thing. I literally had it when they just come out from my local Kia dealership. Yeah. And I'd like to spend more time in one, but it was one of those numbers. You scroll through the menus on the dash, and you think, oh, hello, that's quite a big number. That's the biggest. I can't remember exactly what it was, but that's the biggest number I've seen miles per kilowatt hour. Interestingly, in the hydrogen car, it was. I've got to get this right. It was miles per kilogram of hydrogen, because you weigh when you talk about hydrogen in a hydrogen car, you talk about its weight, not its volume.
Okay.
So you can put in a Mirai, I think it was 7 kilos of hydrogen in the car or something like that. That's very weird. So you had a metric there, miles per kilogram of hydrogen.
I sort of hope. And I don't know, but like with this transition, I think it makes people significantly more aware of the efficiency of the car they're driving, or lack of efficiency. Like a Kia EV6, if you look at it, it is not a particularly efficient car. Like you can tell, it's like kind of big. It's like an SUV. Like that's not going to be that efficient. Like a reference point I have on this one for petrol cars recently. Sam, Seen Through Glass, had an X3 M40i. And I have a 3 Series M40i Touring. And he was like, I get 25 mpg all the time. In my 3 Series Touring, I get 40 mpg. Like, if you're sensible, you get 40 mpg. So, like, That's a significant difference just because you've chosen to be a bit higher up. And in EVs at the moment, everyone's buying SUVs, so they're making a lot of SUVs. And I think for an EV platform, it's quite easy to make an SUV. It's much harder because of the battery packaging and spacing and stuff like that. But I think when the tech evolves, and hopefully I think people will realize, actually, maybe if you have the ability to have two cars, maybe you have a small car for most journeys, and it can be really efficient.
Yeah.
Like I want manufacturers to be going to competing on, you know what? We've got a 25 kilowatt hour battery, but we can do 200 miles. We can do 300 miles on, you know, we get 10 miles per kilowatt hour. And I want that to be something that they compete on. I think they will slowly, but it's not.
The challenge of that, though, is it's not as sexy as going, oh, we can do 0 to 60 in 2.9 seconds, which, let's face it, I mean...
It is to me.
Yeah, and it is to most... So, don't get me wrong, the first time you launch a car, an EV that does 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds is the coolest thing ever. And I said I just had the RS e-tron GT, and I timed that at just under 3 seconds to 60. And absolutely phenomenal thing. I mean, it did 3.4 seconds to 60, 4 up in the rain. It's amazing. Yeah. But you do it 3 or 4 times and pull the eyeballs out the back of your head, and you've done it. That's its party piece, and what you want it to do is be a usable car.
Did you see that e-tron A6?
I was just about to say, have you seen the A6 e-tron concept? There you go. I think up until now, and your comment section will probably light up at this point, there are very few manufacturers. I think MG have an estate EV or estate format EV. I don't think there are. That's it, I think, really. So for me,
Porsche.
Oh well, yeah. I suppose now with the Sport and Cross Turismo, yeah.
It's not a big boot.
No. So that for me, I mean, firstly, what a good looking car that is. Oh my days. You imagine an RS version of that. That's going to be.
Who needs an RS version? The normal one, like we say, will be 0 to 60 in 3 seconds.
I've just gone exactly against what we were just saying. But no, yeah, it's got to happen, right? I think one of my problems with electric and petrol and diesel is the kind of tribalism of EV owners and petrol owners, and it is ridiculous. And any car journalist, YouTuber, podcaster, whoever, you will come across that really, really quickly. And I just don't get it. I love cars. I don't care whether the car's got a petrol engine, a diesel engine, an electric motor, a hybrid. I don't care. They've all got their own merits and their pluses and their negatives. And I like drivers' cars, and I've come across drivers' cars with all of those different types of drivetrains. And I really don't understand that. And the vitriol that comes with some of that tribalism is really not necessary.
Yeah, I think against some, there's people on both of that particular sort of not argument, because I don't think it's an argument. It's like the two sides of like seriously combustion engine EV is the devil, and the people that are like petrol cars are the devil, EV is the future, and whichever brand that they follow is like the sun, and all of that sort of stuff. Like, no, let's just everyone just be open, and we can talk positive about one thing, we can say negative things about one thing. Yeah. Each of these things have their positive and negatives. Yeah. And I think the e-tron concept, the A6 one, was the first EV, and I've kind of been waiting for a while to be like, I would quite like my sort of family car, if possible, at some point in time, probably to be an EV. And I want it to be probably an estate.
Yeah.
So I feel that will lend itself to being more efficient, and therefore, it can have a smaller battery for the same range, which means it will charge much faster and for less money. Not that that's going to be a huge part of it, but that is an element. The speed of charging, if it's got a small battery, it's going to charge faster.
Yeah.
But something like that, and that evolution, and if they chase efficiency and they keep getting more efficient, and let's say they're twice as efficient, you can get 400 or 500 miles out of the same size battery that you could 200 a year ago. Brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a few elephants in the room. I mean, we're just about to have a solar panel solution put in at home to and replace our oil boiler with talking about petrol.
Okay, so
petrol
this
prices.
is interesting.
So petrol price. You know, people are moaning about petrol being £1.70 a litre or something.
Yeah.
Heating oil. So heating oil. The last time I bought heating oil was about 4 months ago, and it was 40 pence a litre. It's currently £2 a litre.
Yeah.
And I buy 1,000 litres at a time.
So this is why you've got.
So we're going. Yeah, we're going. We're going. Solar panels on the roof, air source heat pump, Tesla Powerwall, and then that means I'll be able to charge the electric car for free because it will come straight
really
off the PVs on the roof.
I love the concept of this. I have a few questions. Air source pump. How efficient is your home already, and do you have underfloor heating and stuff like that?
We have underfloor heating, and the home is pretty well insulated. It was renovated. We live in a converted barn, but it was insulated and renovated about 10 years ago. So we are well insulated. We can't. So the air source heat pump. So we're going to take our oil boiler out and replace it with air source. There's a conversation between air source and ground source where you dig the pipe either vertically down or horizontally, but we're going to go for the air source one. The amount of solar panels we can put on the roof mean that in the deepest, darkest depths of winter, when the daylight isn't, days aren't as long and it's quite cold, we won't be off grid. We'll still have to pull power from the grid to power the heat pump to keep the house warm. But in the summer, we'll go the other way. So we'll generate excess electricity and feed that back into the grid and sell it to our electricity provider. Hopefully.
That's good. I love the idea of this.
I mean, we're
financially, have you worked out your break-even point in time?
Well, no, not yet.
It's quite a while.
You don't do it. I don't think you do it for financial break-even straight away. I mean, the solution for us, we live in a 3-bedroom barn, and it's 30,000 quid's worth of investment in the house to do it. Okay. So it's a big chunk. We're converting. We've got a three bay cart barn that we're converting into a garage and an office and a gym and stuff. And we're doing it all at the same time. So at that time, we just feel it's the right thing to do. I think taking getting rid of the oil. We've never been a big fan of the oil. Then just future saleability of the house. I think come 5, 10, 15 years time, if you've got a house that has a solar solution in place, I think it will be an attractive thing. And I think at the end of the day, in 20, 30, 40 years time, we'll all be in that boat anyway.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's a really interesting one. Is like, if you're running an EV, you're running an EV a lot of the time. If you can have some sort of like a power wall or similar, even if where I am now, I'm renting and I couldn't do any of this stuff. And maybe when we find somewhere, we might be able to do it. But I even love the idea of just having the power wall and charging it in the like EV cheap charging, cheap electricity at night, 6p or whatever kilowatt, rather than 20 or whatever. However, this is going to escalate over time, and just having a bit of like, you choose when you take your electricity. I mean, it would be really cool when EVs become part of that system.
Well, because Tesla have got the whole
it can store
car to grid stuff. In theory, they can do it now because you can power a typical family home from a Tesla 100 kilowatt car for 3 or 4 days. And actually, a Powerwall,
probably quite a lot more.
Powerwall is just a big bank of Tesla batteries. They're not cheap. The Powerwall's 8,000 quid for a Tesla Powerwall.
Yeah.
So no, we started at, we'll get some EVs or some PVs on the roof to charge the car for free, and then we've expanded it from there on. But I mean, the elephant in the room I was mentioning before is that's all well and good. Like me, I've got off-street parking. We're very fortunate. But if you live in, like you said, rented accommodation, or we've got a friend of ours who lives in a beautiful development it was the old Ovaltine factory near Kiggs Lanley, and they've got their cars are parked in a garage, but they can't get the landlord to put chargers in the garage, so they can't have electric cars. Or if you've got shared parking, or if you live in a flat and you're on-street parking, that for me, that's the thing that I don't think there's a conversation about that we should be having. And I know in parts of London they're changing, they're putting chargers on lampposts and stuff like that. One of the cars we did
got that on my street, but that's not enough.
No.
Not by a long
because
way.
if you own an electric car and you're using public infrastructure to charge it, it's going to cost you just as much as running a petrol car. Because, depending on your tariff and who you go and get charged with. Whereas, like you said, if you've got one of these lovely energy providers that have cheap overnight tariffs and stuff, I mean, my car charge is linked to my smart meter and knows what tariff I'm on, and I just say, right, I want the car charged by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, and it charges it at the cheapest rate it can. So you get there's some mega technology, and I love all that technology stuff anyway. But so I'll keep you posted about the PVs.
Yeah, that's part of it for me as well.
What gadgets?
I love the tech. I love gadgets. So I'm like, if my house, if I could get the power from the sun, and then I'm not, let's just say for some reason the power goes out in the street or whatever, I'm still there broadcasting. Like, so what?
You are. I was doing my. Remember we had those big strong storms the other week or a month ago. Yeah. I was delivering online training to a client because I still do a little bit of my training job still. To a client in Singapore, and we were, because of the time difference, it was 1 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock in the morning, and the power went out at about 2:30. No power, so I quickly hotspotted my phone, and I had enough battery on my Mac and my phone to last me through the power cut. But I was flapping like a good. But had I had the power wall, I wouldn't have needed to worry. So there you
go. Do you have a OP something? It's got APC written on the front, but I can't remember what the phrase is. But it's basically a battery that your computer plugs into.
No, uninterrupted power supply.
UPS. That's the one. Yeah. I bought one after it couldn't have been a worse time to have the only power cut I'd ever had in 10 years at my previous place when I was doing the backups between two big RAID drives and like copying sort of one to the other, and they both just went
because you need,
luckily it was fine, but after that I bought one of these,
because doing this you'd probably need two. You need an UPS for your computer and a UPS for your wireless router.
The router would go down at that house. My router was plugged into the UPS, so technically I could continue gaming for about 30 minutes after the power went down or whatever, but it was just a buffer.
I know we're talking, like, while we're talking about gaming, you and I need to get on a sim at some stage. And have a race.
What are you running at the moment?
I'll move my camera.
I feel like your setup's got extreme. Nice. I mean, that's good. What do you know? What are you running? Direct drive?
Yeah, direct drive wheel. Yeah.
Nice.
So it's motion simulation LC series. But yeah, it's a great. And then most of the time I'm on iRacing. I've got them all, but I just generally play with iRacing.
So how do you deal with, and you might have the solution I have with iRacing, in cars that don't have ABS? I, to be honest, can't be bothered driving cars that don't have ABS in iRacing because I just fire off the track and like it's
I just end up always driving the same car. I end up driving a 911 GT R, I think, something like that.
And that doesn't have ABS.
No, it can't. Well, it must have, because I just smash the pedal whenever I get to a corner. So I don't It
must have.
Yeah. There's that. There's a radical as well, which is quite good fun. That's quite good fun. But I don't have a steer. I have the. I've got a clutch pedal, but I have to change gears with the paddles because I don't have a gear. Yeah, I love it. I just don't spend.
Why would you not like? Yeah, it's a good pastime. My favorite, I think, at the moment, I spend a lot of time on Assetto Corsa. Not loads of time, but like the time I do is an Assetto Corsa with various road cars sliding around and whatnot. And I was chatting to someone about this at the weekend, actually. Working on hand positioning on a steering wheel when you need to apply more than like crossed over arms amount of
You just need
because
like,
that 100% translates.
The guy out of Fantastic Four, where you can kind of twist your arms around and sort of.
yeah. But it's interesting. You watch different, let's say maybe someone like Chris Harris or Jethro or different people, but everyone has their own take on it. And I would say it's slightly different. If you're intentionally going to slide a car, you probably do stuff differently to if you accidentally slide a car. Yeah. So if it's a race car, most people bang on the most amount of lock straight away, and then your arms hit each other, and then you've got to do something to do more lock. Yeah. If you watch someone who I think is probably the peak, is up there, Gavin Kershaw of Lotus, right, head of vehicle dynamics and making Lotus drive like Lotuses. Yeah. He does the full lock, so your arms almost like hit each other, and then let's say you're turning the wheel left. Your right hand goes over the left one, then you get to a point, he takes the left hand off, right is still on it, and then re-grabs back right round on the right hand side of the wheel and adds more.
Wow.
So like pulls it a bit more, and then to unwind, he lets go of the left. The right is still on it, but like way round, and then comes back round. And he never lets go of the wheel, ever. He's in like full control of the wheel the entire time. And that is actually, when you look at it and you then try it, it's really impressive.
I think for me, if I could have a superpower, it would be that, to be able to do that in a car. Because for me, you watch these guys on, the really top drivers that can do that, and they've gone. If I lose the back end of a car unintentionally, my instant reaction is, "Oh shit, what have I done?" Whereas those guys go, "You've got this," and put more throttle on, and just go with it. And I think it's crossing that line between resisting the take your hand off the steering wheel, take your foot off the throttle, which is the worst thing you can do, and just and going with it. That's a big step, especially if it's not your car and you're at a circuit that's got rubber walls and things like that around you. I'd love to be able to do that.
But you can 100% learn that on a sim.
Oh yeah.
So if you play something like Assetto Corsa, I think is probably one of the most realistic. iRacing, but it's not really set up for sort of messing around quite so much. And you can work out, like, let's say the hand stuff. Yeah. You can start thinking about it and go, right, I'm going to take this one corner 50 times and I'm going to try and slide it. And it won't feel quite the same. It's not going to feel the same as doing it in a car. But you can work out the hand stuff. And you can try different ways of doing it, and you're like, well, what am I going to do with my hands? Lots of people when they're drifting do like a let go and a catch, which when you're drifting works really well, and then you sort of reshuffle it around or whatever. Or you do like they take their hands and one hand sort of passes the wheel sort of underneath to the other one, and then you basically put on an extra half. You've got an extra half of lock that you can then wing it round, and then you undo that extra half. That's what most people, when you see them drifting like a Chris Harris, you'll see one hand come underneath to the other hand, then the other hand grabs on the wheel where they've joined and then takes it the rest of the way around. You see that a lot. But you can try all these things on a sim, and you can try it on one corner and just keep doing it.
Do you know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to go on my sim and play.
Yeah. And then when you go to a track, and ideally somewhere where you've got a hairpin type situation where you're not going anywhere or whatever, but like that muscle memory is there.
Yeah.
And your hands do the right things if you've practiced them on a sim. If you consciously practice these different ways of doing it and watch your favorite person and watch what they do with their hands and try and replicate that muscle memory, if you do it enough, you do it 1,000 times.
Well,
when in a real car, it comes up, your hands will do the hand bit, and then you can work the rest out.
So next time I'm on some press launch and I stick a car in the barriers, I'm just going to say, Sam told me.
That's your fault.
That my muscle memory would be there.
No. Yeah, and it wasn't.
Yeah, no.
You didn't put enough time in.
No. Need more sim time.
There are also loads of other elements.
Yeah. Schoolboy error.
Correct speed and right amount of throttle and all that sort of stuff.
Need a big airfield with nothing to hit.
Yeah. We all need a big airfield and unlimited tyres, which is what you basically used to get as a press journalist. Yeah. You go to Bedford once a week in someone else's car. That's how you get good.
Yeah.
So but I know we seem to have clocked a fair amount of time.
It's good length.
You have do you make a TV show?
Yes. So series 2. So the first time we did a podcast, the first time I appeared, I was filming series 1 of Vintage Voltage. And then the end of that series, we got clobbered a bit by lockdown. So 2 years ago, we had to stop filming, and we lost the last 2 or 3 weeks of filming. And then we started series 2 again. So it's based in a garage in Mid Wales called Electric Classic Cars, and we take classic cars and we rip the engine out and we stick an electric motor in and turn them into electric cars. And it's on the telly box at the moment. So it's been great to kind of, you know, to see the episodes, because the first series I got to see rough cuts of all the episodes. This time I haven't. So the first time I'm seeing it is when it actually hits the telly. So it's been good.
What has been your favourite conversion, let's say, of the latest series?
That's super easy. I actually did a video on the channel. We got a guy who had a classic Mini. It had been in the family for years. He actually learned to drive in it when he was a 17-year-old, and he put a 300 horsepower small Tesla drive unit in it from it'd be the drive units on the front wheels or front axle of a Model S. 300 horsepower, still on 10-inch wheels. Beautiful surf blue. So in a really original Mini color, absolutely ballistic thing. And we filmed that on an airfield. Actually, it was just brilliant. Torque steer. If you ever hear someone complain about torque steer, they have no idea what they're talking about. Basically, this thing you had to lock your left arm into your hip and just hold on tight before you accelerated, because otherwise the wheel would just be ripped out your hand. It was amazing.
One of the things, it seems for some people it's a really controversial sort of thing, putting an electric powertrain in a car, in a classic car. I personally, I don't really care. Like I do think people can do whatever they like.
Well, I was talking to someone today, and I said, look, they're all customers' cars. It's their car; they can do with it what they like, basically. So we did a classic 911, so a 2.7 RS copy. You'd love that one. That had a 450 horsepower Tesla unit in the back. Amazing thing, absolutely amazing. Lightweight fiberglass body. It was super lightweight, beautiful thing. The little Fiat 500s they do are great. I see a picture of one of those. That Ferrari, I've driven that. That's a 308 GTS with a 450 horsepower Tesla drivetrain.
Okay, let's take that car. 308 GTS.
Yeah, I've just driven the original.
You've now driven the original. Compare what's the two experiences like?
The original, I think it was just the drama and the theatre and the visceral nature of it, the gated shifter, all those types of things. Very, very special. But ultimately, they're, in modern day terms, quite slow cars, really. They're only kind of, 200 and something, 250 horsepower, something like that. Whereas that, with the Tesla, 450 horsepower, we do a lot of work on the brakes, the suspension, the weight distribution, and so on. Because 308's got, when the petrol tank drains, they change the weight balance completely, so they get a little bit more edgy, because all the weight's on, or the petrol tank's at the front. So as the petrol tank drains, you get less weight on the front, so they get a bit more understeery.
Yeah,
batteries don't change weight when you drain their power. So, ballistic. But you don't get any of the noise at all. You get like this really weird whine. And when you overtake cars on the road, they freak out because they see this red Ferrari coming up and expect a V8 wail as you go past. They get nothing at all. They can be. I mean, Moggy, who owns that, he's got a Beetle that's running 650 horsepower, large Tesla performance motor. That'll do 0 to 60 in about 3 seconds in a Beetle. They're amazing.
And I think it's like, ultimately, I don't mind. Like, I don't have a particular view. I'd like to drive some of these things and see what they're like. Something I slightly has sort of been mentioned to me by some people that makes me think is you've taken a sort of powertrain from a Tesla, for example, which was designed to be an electric vehicle. You're taking this massive battery pack and this massive motor, but mainly the battery pack, and putting it in a metal box.
Yeah.
What sort of thing do they do to limit the, let's just say, electric like runaway, or somehow cables connecting to stuff and your whole car just evaporates, like all those sort of things with dealing with high voltage systems, but in an old car?
The electric side of the cars and the batteries, I mean, an electric battery pack on any electric car is a really dangerous thing. So they are able to deliver, electric current that will be pretty damaging to you. So the guys that do all the wiring, very skilled, very trained, and the quality of the wiring and all the high voltage cabling and stuff is really, really important to do that properly. In terms of I guess one of the biggest challenges, they're quite heavy. A big battery pack, you could be talking 100, 150 kilos for the really big battery pack. So they go in a battery box that's made of steel, and then it's typically powder coated, and then that's bolted into the car, either to a chassis rail or to so it's firmly installed in the car. So there's a lot of thought goes into, whenever they do a conversion, the simple questions they ask is, okay, well, is it going to be a direct drive motor? So the Tesla units, typically they would go through a gearbox directly into the wheel hub. So they have just two gears, forward and reverse. Some of the older classics, if you don't want so much power, they have motors that might be delivering 100, 120 horsepower. And they actually bolt to the existing gearbox of the car. So you'd maintain three pedals. Okay. You don't need all the gears. They'd normally just use like third and fourth. So you can pull away in third gear because the torque is instant. So they're not producing massive amounts of power, and you still get the three pedal driving thing. So when they do the conversion, what motor is it going to be? How much range do you want? How big's the battery pack going to be? And then most importantly, where's everything going to go? And they place the battery packs, one, in terms of weight distribution, two, in terms of space, but also just in terms of safety. Where's it going to go? How's it going to be anchored in? And so on. So there's a lot of thought goes into that.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think there's possibly a belief that you can just take an old car and just whack in a battery pack and a motor. And I think if you're considering it, you should definitely go and talk to the people that you're considering doing with, and ask some of these questions. That would, what happens if I get hit in the side?
That would be like me saying, I'm going to do a bit of DIY and I'm going to rewire my house. Well, I'm not a trained electrician, so I wouldn't rewire my house. If you're going to do an EV yourself, you need to be a trained vehicle electrician so that you know how to deal with all the various dangers of the battery pack. Because you're talking about 400 volts and above for some of these battery packs. They're big scary things. Actually, at the workshop, there's an area fenced off where they put the batteries in the battery packs and where they do all the wiring, that you cannot go anywhere near it unless you are one of the trained guys, because it's so dangerous. They take these things really seriously.
How do you feel about the changing gear element? Like, a few people do it and they're like, oh, you've got like 3 gears, when in reality, like, it makes no difference. You've got the same in every gear.
I've driven a few of the conversions that have still gearboxes in them. We did a Chesil Speed, so it's like a Porsche Speedster, Carman gear. And you basically, for town driving, you just leave it in third. You don't need any more gears. The weird thing is, you turn the car on, you put it in gear, you lift your foot off the throttle, off the clutch rather, and the car's in gear and on, but it's not moving, and you haven't stalled it because you can't stall an electric car. And then you just drive it on the throttle. You don't actually need the clutch at all. So
why do you put it in neutral?
I guess you don't really need to. You would just, by habit, you would probably at the end of the drive put it in neutral. Then if you
could leave it, put it in third, leave it in third for its entire life,
pretty much. In fact, we did an Isetta, BMW Isetta bubble car, this series, and that was the gearbox we actually manually locked into third gear. So we put a mechanical linkage in the gearbox, so it was locked in third gear permanently, because that's all it needed. And then we just got the motor to run in reverse for reverse gear. So it probably technically go as fast backwards as it could forwards, but which would be a bit scary. But yeah, the changing gear thing. If you went onto a dual carriageway, you might change gear. It would give you a little bit more top end. It would the motor wouldn't rev as much. But yeah, no, they're interesting things, and I think the engineering, Moggy and the team, as a company, they will lend their hand to lots of different types of cars. They've done Fiat 500s, Isetta bubble cars. They're brilliant at Land Rover Defenders. The Defender conversions are amazing. And then you look at someone like Everati, who just specialise in one or two vehicles. So they've got their 911. They're just about to do a GT40. Yeah. That's going to be amazing. So they're taking a Superformance GT40 and giving it 800 horsepower. They're going to have an electric motor at each wheel, basically.
It's an interesting idea. And I'm not sold on that one.
I can't wait to. Well, I don't know if you've driven a GT40.
I'd like to have a go.
I've driven a Superformance GT40, and it's all about the noise, and it's all about the overrun and the flames coming out the back, and you're not going to get any of that, but it's going to go really fast. So.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing. I'd love to try one. In terms of the modern stuff, so have you driven the? You've driven the BMW i4 M50.
Yes, I have.
What's that like?
Very good.
I feel like that's the most
it's the most.
It seems like a sort of
normal car like EV. Yeah, it's like it's a 4 Series Grand Coupe, isn't it? Really, it's a brilliant thing. It's got that big sweeping screen. So if you don't like your screens and your touch screen, you might not like the interior. But as a car, brilliant performance. And I drove that car for 40 minutes to an hour. I didn't get to really get under its skin, but very, very good car. The other new BMW electric car that's brilliant is the iX. Now, you might not like the looks of it, but that's the big kind of SUV thing with the big beaver teeth grille on the front. But my days, is it a good car? If in terms of the interior and stuff, it's a stunning thing. But I'm just not. It just doesn't look great from the outside.
So why do this to us? Why cause us these headaches?
Like a challenging car.
The last time we saw each other, I know. The last time we saw each other was actually at a BMW press drive day. I drove a few cars, but the standout for me was the M3 X-Drive. I'd not driven that before, which actually I thought was brilliant. I really liked that car. Apart from the front, I just don't like.
And I drove the M4 X-Drive competition convertible, and loved it. But it's got the same front. Now, I personally, I don't mind. I've got over it. I've not got a big thing about it at all. I just think they are ballistically quick cars. Though they're fantastic things. But
surprisingly fast. That was surprisingly quick to me. Like you're like, do you need to go faster than this? And then the way the X-Drive works, you're like, this. You can really go for it in that car without worrying about.
Well, even the two-wheel drive ones got so much traction. To be honest, they're phenomenal things. But the styling, especially the iX is
that. But the iX, that really does sort of, I don't know. I guess they're doing this thing. Everyone's moaned about it. I'm going to moan about it. But the interior looks great. Everyone says it's a really good car. But anyway, whatever. We need some more small. I want some more small electric cars.
I couldn't agree.
Small, efficient. Absolutely. Kind of like the i3.
Small, efficient and estate, so you can put baby stuff in the back and bikes and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. And get good range and be somewhat efficient.
Exactly.
But it'll be interesting to see how this evolves over the next 5 years or so.
I think with 2030 and 2035 looming, I think it will be interesting.
Yeah, we'll see. If you're doing anything else that stands out that you can think of in the last, 6 months?
You
Pista?
I drove a Pista. Yeah, that was pretty special. I had the for theatre, I had the 812 GTS from Ferrari. That was my first Ferrari press car. So that was a special thing.
It's like one and done now.
Yeah, that was amazing. It's funny. The obvious cars that Cayman GT4, brilliant car. But then it's other things that you wouldn't expect to be that brilliant. You know, the kind of just a normal family car sometimes that will surprise you. I still have quite a fond spot for a Suzuki Swift Sport, bizarrely enough. I drove that like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Not a particularly expensive car, but what a hoot. Brilliant fun. Fiesta ST, brilliant car. Puma ST, brilliant car.
Yes.
So those types of things, you know, sometimes it's the lower end stuff that puts a bigger smile on my face than the higher end stuff. Obviously, getting to drive Ferraris and stuff is always very special. But yeah, I drove a Mark 1 Golf with a Mark 4 Golf 20 valve engine in it recently. That was just ridiculous thing. So I love the bizarre stuff. I don't know whether I spoke to you last. I drove a Fiat 500 with a Hayabusa bike engine in it. That was the most bonkers thing I've driven.
I think you might have just driven that.
That was insane. Brilliant in a brilliant way. But yeah, so I that's why, you know, the coming back to what we were talking about earlier on in the chat about Bonhams and just getting access to just really, really weird things and interesting things.
I'm really in like a modified, messed with cars. Like I want to see people doing stuff that's like a bit stupid, or they've changed it because they think they're going to make it better. Like a really nice version of that recently I saw, had a passenger ride in a Cayman GT4, so 718 GT4, but it had shorter gearing.
Oh, excellent.
And transformed the car. Like already great.
When I got the Cayman, it was the same for, I've driven the Spider as well, the 718 Spider and the manual one. And I just didn't want to be cliche and go, oh, the gearing's too long. But you drive one and the gearing's too long. So you can't not say anything about it.
That's it. We were on some sort of small British back roads, and what was the company? I can't remember. They're like a sort of Porsche specialist northwest of London, and they sell a lot of cars, and they do the Manti racing stuff in the UK. And this was a Manti gearbox change. And I went out, they took me out on some back roads, and I was like, I'd just been in a friend's, this is an interesting one. He is having a GT3, so he bought a PDK GT3, 991.2, took the wing off, so he's had it touring converted. He's put clear glass in the back because it didn't have clear glass, and he wanted clear glass. And he's put rear seats in it.
Wow.
And then changed the suspension as well. So I drove that car, and I'm gonna do something with it at some point when we can do it. But I drove it for 10 minutes, and that was pretty cool. I think that's for me, that's quite a cool conversion and a cool thing to do. But then they took me for a spin in the GT4. And on the same roads, the GT4 was a much nicer car. It's like smaller. The suspension was more compliant. Like it went down the road really nicely. It sounded pretty good. And you could rev it out more because it's got less power and the gearing was like a bit shorter. And I thought, you know what? A Spider with the shorter gearing is probably like an amazing weekend fun road car. Don't necessarily go on the track occasionally, but like it's not going to be the track weapon. But as a road experience, that's probably pretty damn good.
I mean, you know, that 992 GT3, I drove that not that long ago, and that again, great car. And you just hate anyone who's got one of those basically, because I'd want one really badly. But I think there's a space.
What did you think of the ride and steering?
I knew the second I got in it at Porsche Reading, I turned full lock and got the Ackerman bump. I thought, okay, this is going to be a bit. It's direct. Like I thought my Mini was pretty, like, because I've got a really aggressive setup on my little Mini Roadster, and it's nothing compared to the Porsche's. Like you have to be on it, otherwise you're going to stick it in a hedge. And the ride is pretty firm.
Yeah,
I was more, I think, less worried about the ride quality. Everyone said how firm it was. That wasn't too bad. I've got a car on coilover, so it's not too bad. It was just the steering is so sharp and so direct. In a good way on a track, I'm sure. On the road, sometimes it could track and and kind of follow the road a little bit. And if you weren't on your A game all the time, you're gonna end up, having some amusement. I think it reminded me a bit of the Mini GP3 actually, because the Mini GP3 is like, when you put your foot down in that as you're overtaking something, you hold on tight, otherwise you're going to be in a hedge. But the GT3 is way better than a GP3. So it was good. Yeah.
Yes, someone let me drive theirs for a little bit, like 20 minutes. And the first thing that stood out to me was the steering. Like this is seriously, it's quite like an aggressive setup in terms of how much it tracks the road and camber and whatnot. But in terms of feeling and sort of that stuff, significantly different to the previous car. Like noticeably more kind of hardcore than the previous car. But yeah, an interesting one. And then we've got today released the GT4 RS videos from everyone.
I've watched them all. That looks like a great car.
It looks like a great car, and then it looks like a fun car. And I think it's that, like the ethos of that car, to me makes more sense actually than a GT3 RS, because GT3 RS has got to the point, and we're going to see the new one come out, which is going to be mental. But that's basically a track toy that you can drive to the track rather than a fun road car. And I think the GT4 RS probably does that.
I drove the GT3 and thought,
really
how are they going to make
car.
a GT3 RS? Because this thing's just amazing. So
it's the most RSy GT3 by quite a long way.
Yeah, because I've driven a 991 GT3 RS.
I'm aware that we're chuntering along, and
it's probably nearly tea time.
Going to have some dinner. Exactly. So I normally wrap this up with 5 questions. You've been on it a few times, so I'm not going to ask you 5 questions. Most undervalued car at the moment?
Oh man, in terms of where it could go from a
what should be worth more?
I'm going to say I'm going to categorize, rather than a single car. I'm going to just categorize. I think over the next 5 years or so, I think. Normally aspirated cars that are driver-oriented sports cars of any kind are going to end up going up in value, because I think people are going to start to realise that that we're not going to see them anymore. And I already see that in new cars coming out. They're all hybrids or EVs or and I think a pure naturally aspirated sports car, whether that's an MX-5 or whether that's a V12 Ferrari. I just think there'll come a point where they'll just naturally start to either hold their value or some of them will start to appreciate in value, because I think people just know they won't. And I think the more exotic end of that are likely to go up. But I just think we're going to start to see a shift for looking back and going, oh, remember that when we used to be able to buy a naturally aspirated petrol car? Wow. And I
Rev to 9 or whatever.
That far away. Yeah, I really don't.
I would love to see, before they disappear, some NA hybrids. Like I'm not particularly bothered about an NA hybrid, but like I'd rather just NA. But rather than turbo hybrid, I want NA hybrid, and make them a bit slower, but make them rev to let's see some engines rev to 10 or something. That'd be amazing. I mean, 9 is pretty.
I had a Honda S2000
for
5 years, and that was a 9,000 RPM rate, and it was great because you'd hit 9,000 RPM every day. But yeah, I think just generally that I in a way, I feel part of me feels a little bit sad when you see all the new cars coming out, and you kind of, there's something so special about an on-song V6, V8, or inline 5 or whatever. When you hear them, and to know that you're not going to be able to buy them again soon, it's quite sad. Yeah,
it's a shame. You see something briefly touching it, like the MC20 new Maserati car come out. I've watched a bunch of reviews. Everyone's like, "Oh, it's amazing," whatever. And I unfortunately I can't get excited about that car, because as much as you tell me, you write in your bits of paper or on your video that it sounds amazing or sounds good, I know it does not sound as good as an NA V12, Porsche 6, and all that stuff. It's just it's like 10, 15, 20% less in the sound department. And that is the bit that really gets you tingling. It's that last bit from like 7 to 9 that's when like all the fizz happens. Yeah, it's a shame. Well, there's still fun stuff to drive.
Exactly.
Right. Most interesting car to you at the moment?
Well, apart from the Nichols, which we've mentioned already, because I'm quite closely involved in following that development of that car. The kind of the really high end hypercar-y stuff doesn't. I appreciate it, Valkyries and T50s and those types of things, and to hear them is amazing.
Yeah.
But I'll never be in a position to afford those. So actually, the more attainable sports car things, as I'm getting to the point where I could maybe afford one. So be that a Porsche Boxster or Cayman or 911, something like that. Because they're cars that I'm at a position where I could probably actually afford to buy one. So that's what I'm kind of looking at and Googling and
you're
trying to work out what I could have next in my garage that's, in the kind of 50 to 60,000 pound mark. That's, maybe a touch more than that if I needed to. And just to try and find what you've got in that mark. Now, my challenge with I'd love a 911, but to spend that kind of money on a 911, you're probably still looking at a 7 or 8 year old car, and I can't get my head around doing that. If I'm going to spend 60 grand on a car, it needs to be 18 months to 2 years old, tops. So that's it's the what comes next. Is it a little open top 2-seater? Is it a fast family wagon? Is it what is it? So that's the best bit. When you decide you're going to buy a new car, you start spending lots of time on Auto Trader and trying to work out what it's going to be and what you can afford. So that's for me the most interesting thing is trying to work out what's next.
Yeah. It's a good a car that fits into that bracket, but not all of your reasonings. That I find really interesting moments is that I'm loving all of the Porsche Spiders, but the 987 Spider, I kind of remember those coming out, and like a white 987 Spider, they were kind of all white, but I just think they've aged really well. And they're holding their value, so they're kind of like annoyingly expensive for when you look at them. And I think they're probably a little bit slow in reality, but I think they're super cool, and I think they're about 40 or something at the moment.
And I think that I've got offered a ridiculous deal on one of the last Exiges, an unregistered Exige 350, and man, I was so tempted with that. But then it's such a very focused car, to spend that kind of money and have a car. Really, it's just a track day car. You can't really do too much else in it. I
liked the Exige, but I much preferred an Evora. And now we've got the Emira. The Exige for me was just too hardcore for what I would want to use a car for. Really,
that's why I didn't buy it.
But pretty fun. Yeah. Fair enough. Final question. 5-car garage, unlimited value.
I should have prepped this one. I am going to... I knew you were going to ask it as well. I'm going to... hypercar-wise, I'm going to be really, really boring and just say McLaren F1, because I still think, for me, that was the poster car of my youth, and I still think it's one of the most... Whether it would be a road car one or one of the kind of... Because I live really close to Lanzanti, right? So I drive past the Lanzanti showroom all the time. They've always got ridiculous McLaren F1s in the car in the showroom. So one of those for sure. From a practical daily point of view, I think something like a fast wagon. I think so. Probably not the size of an RS6, but I'd say RS4. But actually, I'd probably wait for the M3 Touring, because I think that's going to be amazing. So I think I don't think I'm going to see him until next year. But an M3 Touring, can I have a car that doesn't actually exist yet?
M3 Touring, I think, is all right.
But
we know it exists.
You could probably order one now by the time we get. So that would be my, and that's unusual for me, because normally I would be an Audi kind of Audi kind of person.
And you wouldn't go Alpina B3?
I don't know that much about Alpinas, to be honest, which is a bad admission. But yeah, I mean,
they're quite hard to find and get hold of to drive.
Yeah. I mean, I'll have a chat with Joe. He seems to do that quite well, but he is Mr. BMW. So there we go. I'd really like a kind of track day play car, but I'm going to go a bit left field. And good mate of mine, they make Lancia Delta Integrale rally cars. So I would love to have a Lancia Delta Integrale rally car made. They're about 100 grand.
Sick.
Full roll cage.
That would be cool.
Martini livery. That would just be, and I've driven his. They're like 350 odd horsepower, and they're just amazing things. So that would be my play thing. I think. I'd need to have an electric car in there. I think. So electric wise. I'm probably going to say Taycan Sport Turismo, I think, at the moment. Just because I think the styling wise, I think they look great. I probably wouldn't go as bad as saying Turbo S, but Turbo. And then the last one, I would want some kind of resto mod, I think.
Which one?
Either the little Alphaholics, because I just think that's cute and very lovely. Or one of the, I mean, there's so many different, you're the 911 guy to ask, right? So, from Singer to, there's so many of them, aren't there? But when you see one of those.
What age do you want if you're going 911?
Kind of your, have you still got your one? For now.
I don't think for that long.
You've been talking about getting rid of that for so long.
It's great.
Yeah, so that kind of age. Yeah. But I just think I've got my next door neighbour's got I don't know what model it is. I'm sorry, my Porsche knowledge is, but he's got a Rentec one, and it's a beautiful little thing. A little ducktail spoiler on the back, and it's just really, really lovely. And there's just something very cool about them. So, but I think I would be pipped by Mrs. Greaves. She would want me to have a Porsche Speedster, one of the old, the kind of Kelly McGillis from Top Gun style things. I think she'd like one of those in the garage. So yeah, that's probably
that'd be nice.
Yeah, we play this game all the time. They're doing top 5 cars, and you could go really silly. I didn't have a racing car, but I suppose my Delta Integrale is pretty rally car.
Rally car.
So, yeah. So,
you could rally that.
Well, that's what my mate Ellis does, actually. Yeah. So
yeah, that's cool.
Cool. What a monster podcast!
Well, thanks very much for coming on the podcast. Yeah,
it's
been good.